The opinions expressed on this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect those of Cable 14, its sponsors, or its shareholders, Cogeco Cable, Shaw Cable, and Source Cable Limited.
Welcome to the O Show. I'm Laura Babcock, and Loren Lieberman is off again this week, but we have joining us Dave Shuttleworth. We'll say hi to Dave in just a second. Here's what's coming up on the show. There's lots to talk about, as usual in Hamilton. We're going to talk about why there are so many barriers in this city for persons with disabilities and what council is going to do about that. We're also going to talk about being put in the dark. Was there a transparency committee in the city? Is it gone? And did anyone tell us about it? We'll talk about that. Plus, we're going to talk about some other updates on important issues and what happened this past weekend with the Santa Claus Parade and Remembrance Day. Had a lot of you talking. We'll get into that. But first, let's say hi to Dave. Dave, how you doing?
I'm good, Laura. How are you?
Well, you're better than good. I understand congratulations are in order.
Yeah, actually, thank you very much. My wife Jen and I had another baby girl just about 3 weeks ago. Emily Sarah is very happy and healthy and hungry. And yeah, it's keeping us up at night, but that's 3 girls for us. So
that's awesome.
I'll be worried in about 15 years.
Yeah.
I'll be worried.
Well, they're lucky girls because I know you love your kids so much, Dave. So congratulations.
Thank you, Laura.
And I've been up all night with my kids because of cold. So you know what? Won't hold it against you if you're a little slow.
That's okay. We're in the same ballpark
Exactly.
then. Perfect.
Well, congratulations on that. And Loren, of course, sends his regrets. He's off doing something somewhere that's secretive and.
Loren has no regrets at all.
Yeah,
None.
that's very true. Loren has no regrets, not even for missing this show. Well said. Okay, let's talk about a couple of other things that are going on. An update for you. We've been talking the last month or two about the ongoing issue with those social service downloading of those social service benefits they call them discretionary benefits, and we've talked about that. So people in Hamilton who desperately need glasses and cribs and funeral services, and the province stopped paying for that. The city of Hamilton had a lot of meetings to discuss what they could do about it, and on last week's program, Loren and I debated the idea of them putting forward a 1% property tax increase to cover those costs. Loren and I were both in support of that, understanding that, you know, sometimes we have to pay property taxes to get what we need in a city. However, council has decided that they're going to fund that money this time from reserves in the city coffers. So that's what they've decided they're going to do about it. So the good news, of course, that these benefits are getting extended for all those people who rely on it. But of course, there's going to be a push to try to get that money back from the province and sustainably going forward. Okay, so let's get to some of our topics this week. Something came up this weekend that got a lot of people upset. And this was, of course, the decision to have the Santa Claus Parade and tree lighting take place in advance of the Remembrance Day ceremonies and parade. Let's get some of the facts from Dave on this. Dave?
Well, this is a quote from Councillor Sam Marula. As a direct response to an overwhelming amount of calls, I am serving notice that I will be drafting and presenting a protocol to ensure that any official Christmas or Santa Claus parade and erecting of a Christmas tree in Hamilton be pursued in the future following Remembrance Day.
So for a councillor to come out with a formal motion like that gives you a sense of the uproar that it caused. How did you feel about it, Dave?
Well, it was funny because I even said it was November the 1st actually to somebody that I happened to be talking to that this was the first year that I hadn't seen any Christmas paraphernalia or Christmas songs or anything like that prior to Halloween. So that being the first thing that I noticed, it was a bit of a surprise to me that we were having the Christmas Santa Claus parade so early. I didn't really think about it in the context of Remembrance Day. Yes, it could be interpreted as inappropriate, but what is happening in the weekends after? Like what's happening this Saturday or the following Saturday as opposed to this past weekend? Why did we need to have it so early? That's what I wondered about and what was keeping it there. With respect to the Santa Claus parade, the Hamilton Santa Claus parade I have always found to be lacking. It is kind of lame. I've gone the last few years. I chose not to go this year. We were had other plans, but the Santa Claus parade, it could do a lot better. And there should be I think, a higher standard. There's plenty of Santa Claus parades in the surrounding areas, surrounding communities that are a lot nicer, a lot more pleasant to look at, and a lot more pleasant to be at. So I've never really been a fan in the last few years of the Santa Claus parade, but to put it before Remembrance Day, the day before Remembrance Day, I see how it is inappropriate.
Well, there's an excellent editorial cartoon in The Spectator of vets having to clean up from the parade the day prior. The cenotaph, I'm hoping that wasn't the actual case, but it makes the point. A couple of things that you brought up on this day, which is interesting, is the whole Santa Claus parade thing. I was at the Burlington one last year, and I've been invited to go to the Toronto one this year, and I'll check those out. But what I have noticed with the Hamilton one and with Burlington a little bit, not quite so much, is that they can turn into just flatbed trucks of people waving and promoting their companies.
I don't mind. You know what? I don't mind. If you want to go out and get a flatbed truck, that's great. And obviously, you're putting in an effort. But it's just it's getting a car or a minivan and then writing a little sign, pasting it to the side of the car, and then people marching around it with no real identifiable items to show who they are. Additionally, I've seen people smoking in the parade and really not taking it seriously. So as far as other communities, Grimsby, for instance, they do it at dusk. They require that you have a certain standard, a Christmas theme, whatever it might be. I don't mind your business or your service group or whatever you happen to be, but it's got to be Christmassy, and Hamilton does lack that.
Yeah, and actually I'm just remembering now that Loren and I were in the Stony Creek Santa Claus Parade a couple of years ago in Ron Corsini's little car, and we did have the Cable 14 sticker on the side.
And there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, so we were identified. It was a nice parade, but so here's a couple of points on this. One is, I agree with you. I think the parade itself needs some standards. I mean, why are we taking the kids down there to, first of all, as a parent of young children, for Santa to be in town, you know, a full 6 weeks prior to when he arrives? It's kind of hard to explain, right? My 2-year-old saw the picture. She goes, Santa? I go, yeah, he was in Hamilton briefly. He's coming back in 6 weeks. So I think from the start of it, there's not a lot of appeal to go down there and watch the parade. No. And we need to. I think that's a great idea you gave, Dave. And also the timing. You know, it used to be in December. Now I understand it's to get people shopping. It's the most important retail season of the year, Halloween being the second most lucrative day for that. But Remembrance Day, on a much more important note here, is starting, I think, to mean more. Last week during the show, Loren gave a way to go out to so many more people wearing the poppies. And I attended at a school. I want to give a shout out to Richard Beasley's school. They had a Remembrance Day ceremony on Friday, and it was the best I have ever seen. I was completely moved to tears by it. The kids did a wonderful job. I'm starting to see Remembrance Day as being the more important holiday, you know, in terms of at least the month of November. And I don't think that Christmas should in any way be taking away any of the impact from that.
Well, what I have, and I would agree with you, it's taken an additional war for Canada to be involved in order to get more people interested in it. But when I was in talk radio, one of the themes that we talked about every time that year was, what are we going to do to send the message to children about the significance of Remembrance Day? That problem seems to be solving itself in that they do take an active interest, and that the people coming to talk about them are not old men talking about what they did 50, 60 years ago. It is much more prevalent, it's much more relatable, and it's much more age specific. So that's really happy. And the truly unfortunate thing is that this has compromised that, to put the Santa Claus parade, as lame as it is, before this really significant event that is Remembrance Day.
Absolutely. And just as a note on that, something that I found very relevant was a video by, I believe the artist is Terry Kelly, and I posted it on my Facebook page. People can friend me and check that out. And it was an amazing thing about just taking the 2 minutes for our veterans. So we certainly appreciate our veterans and remember them here on the O Show. And I think we've come up with some good prescriptions for the Santa Claus parade next year. Let's see if we can make it even better here in Hamilton.
If they don't have a good outfit, just toss them out.
That's right. Okay. Well, you know what? Or as you said, at least a themed float and some kind of relevance and something to make us want to stand in the cold and clap. Okay. Let's move on to an important issue here in town as well, and that is that there are a lot of barriers to people who have disabilities. Now, I've kind of always been aware of that, Dave, but what I was not aware of is just how many people in our community do have a disability. And of course, the fact that our recreational activities here in the city, there are barriers to them, and there's a lot being done about it. Let's get the facts from you on this.
The facts are that 1/5 of Hamiltonians have a disability. That's 106,000 people
Did you know that,
in the community.
Dave?
No, I didn't. No, I didn't. And it just says disabilities, though. So the report commissioned by the city's advisory committee for the persons with disabilities 3 years ago to ensure compliance with the Accessibility of Ontarians with Disabilities Act. That's what the acronym is. 53 recommendations were made in 4 categories: programs and facilities, public awareness and marketing, partnership development rather, and service improvement.
So since this report was commissioned to come back to council, council saw it. They've given the go-ahead to look into these. One of the people, authors of the report, said, if all of these recommendations, all 53 were taken in, it would be incredibly expensive.
Absolutely.
And that's not the intent. The intent is to foster better collaboration. And I guess, as I'm understanding it, more work was being done in silos, and this report process has really brought groups together so that there can be more effective, hopefully, use of these resources. But let's get back to that stat. So 1/5 of our population in Hamilton is a person who has a disability.
Now, the question that I have there, and numbers speak volumes, right? You put a big number out there, 106,000, we all go, wow, shocking, just like you and I are doing right now. But that doesn't say, it never said physical disabilities. It just said people with disabilities. Sure. And then, of course, the story that I read, quoting Lisa Schumpf, whom I've known for a number of years, she was on the advisory committee. And then one story about a young man who has to go out to Brantford for swimming because he doesn't have the facilities here in Hamilton. Right. I'm not going to make any judgment here, other than to say are you serious that we don't have the facilities here in Hamilton to handle somebody with a disability in a swimming pool in the city? I take my daughter to Dalewood every Saturday morning for swimming lessons. Obviously, she doesn't have any disabilities. She's learning to swim, but there clearly is an apparatus there that is designed for people with disabilities to swim, and I'm assuming that other kids have that as well.
So do you dispute the numbers, or do you just say that because they don't speak to physical disabilities, it might
that's exactly what I'm saying, the latter part of what you said there. It doesn't speak specifically to people with physical disabilities. So we're all about a big number and a big statistic. However, let's break that number down and say how many people in this community, first of all, have a desire to access these facilities, and second of all, which are the places that they need to go for that, and specifically because of their physical disability, because it's the physical disability, obviously, that we need to address.
Well, I think it's both, and I think that barriers are barriers, and one of the things that I appreciated about this process and this report is that not only is it going to get us in compliance with the provincial standard, but it's also raising awareness. I remember years ago I went to a Safe Street meeting and heard about the fact that, nice beautification things back in the day, like planters and garbage cans, and that actually made it so that people who had disabilities in terms of their vision, or they couldn't move around them, or they couldn't. I mean, what I saw as being nice for other people meant a complete barrier. And I remember one time our Rotary Club was talking about a venue for somewhere, and I suggested a place that didn't have an elevator, not even aware that a member of our club wouldn't be able to join the rest of us. So for those of us who don't have these disabilities, I think a report like this helps us be aware that the things we take for granted, like city programs, like recreation, like facilities, like even safe passage, these are things that are hard fought for by people with disabilities, so that they have some equity, that there's some fairness.
I live in the Durand neighborhood, so there's 2 parks that we can take the kids to, one of them being Durand Park, the other one being the HAAA grounds. HAAA grounds, from what I understand, is the park that has gone the longest in the entire city without any renovations or upgrades to it. There is one swing that is dedicated for kids with disability. It is a bigger swing. It has a belt on it, and it's not sand that you have to use to access it. It's that rubber mat. It's a rubber mat is what it is. The problem with that is it's not necessarily used by kids with disabilities. It's used by teenagers who want to try to spin it over the top or spin it around or something like that. I've taken the opportunity a couple of times to say, guys, that's not for you, that is for kids. So what I'm seeing is even in my immediate area on a very outdated park, there are still those accessibility requirements that appear to me to be met. So what I'm saying is these 53 recommendations that they're making, that's good, but we got to break them down a little bit more so that we can understand, we can assess the accessibility issues.
Yeah, and we have to make sure that they're affordable, of course, but most importantly that they're in compliance with the standard, because as I said, it's ground that's been hard fought for, and becoming aware first that 1/5 of our entire population has a disability and that we don't have the adequate resources or programs for them. I'm glad that kudos to Council for moving on this into the committee that worked these last 3 years together, and I hope there's a much brighter future and we don't have so many barriers. So good work, and I agree with you, Dave. Let's boil it down and see what we can afford and what the priorities are. Okay, let's get to another issue that maybe there's not some kudos for Council on, and this is regarding, there's a couple of issues on that, Dave. I see Dave going, let's get to the whole succession thing. Sure. We'll get to that last. Let's talk now about the fact that there was a transparency committee set up, if you recall, under Mayor Fred. That was a big deal back then. And Mayor Fred was looking at having transparency, the integrity commissioner, which we all know that eventually happened, and there is an integrity commissioner. We could argue about the success of that role, and I would say that I'm not very impressed so far. However, another thing that they were going to tackle was this lobbyist registry. Do you remember that, Dave?
I do.
So give us the facts.
Well, the facts on this, the City Transparency Subcommittee, not the committee, but the subcommittee set up by former Mayor Fred Eisenberger during his term. The Integrity Commissioner was created, but a registry for lobbyists was not.
Do you remember what that registry was supposed to be all about?
The specifics of it? You're going to put me on the spot here?
Okay.
Do tell me, Laura, what are these specifics?
I remember there was a brouhaha back in the day because some groups and some people who are watchdogs on City Hall business wanted to make sure that people who are getting the ear of Council were registering, right?
And this is to do with Enbridge and the pipeline, yes.
And a whole lot of other business that goes on. So lots of people are unofficial lobbyists. In other words, they have drinks with councillors, they have access to Council, but they're just informed citizens or concerned citizens or people with certain power, etc. It can get very, very gray, and it happens everywhere. In fact, I was always fascinated to know, one of the origins I heard of the word lobby was that in the old Washington Hotel in Washington, a certain president liked to go for drinks in the evening, and so people who wanted to bend his ear would line up in the lobby, hence lobbyists. So it's all about access, and it can be about influence, and part of the Transparency Initiative was to get these people registered. Well, that hasn't happened, and in fact the Transparency Committee, as we saw in a press release put out by Catch, which is, as you know, a citizen watch group, said that the committee's been shut down. There's not really a lot of transparency around that either. So the lights have been turned out on the committee that was supposed to illuminate us about who's lobbying Council. Let's
be more politically correct. You use the term gray area, and gray should be open to interpretation, I think is a better way. Instead of gray, we don't want to make it look insidious in any way.
But it is,
the fact of the matter is you cannot dictate where a councillor goes for breakfast or for a drink after work or for lunch or something like that. They happen to be having lunch with somebody, yeah, sure, people are going to be talking and that sort of stuff. This was also an issue when we were debating on the hockey team, and were we going to get either the Nashville Predators or the
well, they had that
Phoenix
famous
Coyotes.
Breakfast meeting.
The breakfast meeting, yes. and who was there and who was not there and that kind of stuff. You can't stop them from doing that. So if a topic of business is going to come up, that's going to happen.
But I think that's naive, Dave. I think that everybody knows that there is lobbying happening. When you have, and I said this at the time, when you have several councillors meeting with an interested party and talking about said issue, then it's obviously not a happenstance occurrence. People get that that's how things are working. So here's my point on this. It is insidious. There's lots of things that happen in city around politics and money that are insidious. This idea of having a registry for the lobbyists was a way to bring transparency. It is apparently not going to happen without a lot of explanation of why not. Doesn't that raise concerns for you?
It doesn't, because, I mean, God knows nothing gets accomplished during an actual council meeting or subcommittee meeting, and I say that, of course, with tongue in cheek. But the fact is, if somebody wants to bring up an issue ahead of time to say, look, this is what we are going to do, I don't see anything wrong with that, as long as the parameters are discussed within the council meeting, right? It's going to be blatantly obvious if somebody's going for lunch all the time with the same people or meeting behind closed doors with the same people, eventually people are going to say, what's going on?
I think this raises questions about why was the registry idea, why did it drop? Is there a good reason for it? And what's going on? But I'm going to challenge you on one point you made. You said nothing happens at council subcommittees. Well, a council subcommittee did decide not to endorse a staff project. We'll talk about that right after I do a quick thank you to our sponsors here, to Pennington's. They always give me wardrobe and jewelry. I appreciate it, Pennington's, very much. And of course, Madison Avenue does my hair, and occasionally Loren's, which we're all thankful for. Okay, so at a council subcommittee, something was achieved or not achieved, depending on how you take it. Let's get the facts on this one, Dave.
Well, the council subcommittee in this particular case, 15 senior managers, this is the situation right now at City Hall. 15 senior managers plan to retire within the next 3 years. 6 of those positions have an internal candidate prepared for the role. The council committee overturned city staff requests for $177,000 for a consultant and 1 new full-time position. Right. To lead us through that succession plan.
So they've got a problem where they've got 6 people ready to take over these jobs, and that leaves, my math is horrendous, but the difference of people that they need to get.
9, I would say, if there's 15, okay.
Yes. They need, and this is serious, right? If that much turnover in a couple of years of senior managers are big portfolios. They make a lot happen in the city. And so city staff have come to council and they've made the request saying, you know, we want to hire a consultant on a contract to help with some of this, and we want to hire a full-time staff person to work on this leadership development, an expert, and they were rejected for the $177,000 price tag. My issue on this is it's probably necessary help. They probably don't know how to be competitive and how to bring in the right people and or succession plan and bring up people, because managers have their main job that they're doing, they're executing on. And I know from the work that I do with companies that as a consultant, I'm often brought in to bridge the gap, either the skills gap or they just simply don't have the ability to focus on that. So staff came back to council and said, we need the skill support, we need the time support from a consultant and a full-time job to make sure we have the right people coming up. I don't think staff sold it well enough to council, because if you're looking at a $177,000 price tag for the initial year, I'm assuming, of this full-time job plus the $50,000 one-time contract, and maybe that full-time job continues in perpetuity, so there's a bigger price tag. But did they make the ROI, to the return on investment, to council? Did they say to them, listen, this is the money that we will lose if we cannot hire competitively, if we cannot have these people in place? This is what could happen. The worst case scenario, this $177,000, while it's an expense we don't want to have to incur, is actually going to mitigate that worst case scenario. So I don't think they made the case.
Well, no, okay. You might have a point. I wasn't there at the meeting where they were trying to make the case, but to have a price tag of under $200,000 to analyze how we're going to fill 15 senior management positions. And let's be honest, the business of the city is operated by city staff. The councillors could up and leave tomorrow for months and months and months, and guess what? And no city councillor would like to admit this, but the business of the city would continue.
Now, you wanted to be on council, so some might say that's sour grapes.
Yeah, so that's not sour grapes on my point. I'm fully... I fully understand the ramifications of what I just said, but the fact of the matter is the business of the city is operated within the city staff, not by city council or by the mayor's office. They just cast a vote, and they voted wrong in this particular case. You got 15 people that are going to retire. There's only a limited amount of people in the pool to hire from within, so you got to look outside. This is a very, very good investment. It seems to me a low investment. However, the councillors like to look good by refusing this, because they don't want to look like we're spending taxpayers' dollars on a consultant. And it's that one word, consultant. But in this particular case, the consultant was only 50 grand.
Yeah.
So every smart corporation, which the city is, needs a proper succession plan, and to spend less than 200 grand on a succession plan, I think was a smart investment that we lost out on.
No, so I think you're right that the consultant word, in some city choices in the past, there hasn't been a lot that's been produced by some consultants, and others have been very successful, but it's always a little dicey, and it's never easy for council to look like they're spending money. However, on this one, I think that they need to really make sure they understand the limitations of the current staff and what the risks are before this is a completely dead issue.
Let's throw in our resumes for those 15 open positions.
No, don't want any of it, but not at all. But let me just say, I don't want to work for the city, but let me just say this. I also think the way that council conducts themselves has a lot to do with whether or not they draw top talent from other cities, right? Because they're ultimately the policy-setting bosses to the management execution of the staff. So they should keep that in mind. Okay, let's get on to our way to goes. As usual, we need to end on a positive note. We always seem to be cynical by the end of our discussions. Let's do the way to goes. I'll let you.
All right, way to go to our veterans and active service personnel. We were talking about this, about the awareness of Remembrance Day. So we say, way to go. We remember your service and your sacrifice.
And one of our viewers made a compelling argument to me on, I think, Twitter or Facebook, saying, and also, of course, all of the victims of war. Remembrance Day is about not wanting any more war, and the victims are included in that as well. This year's recipients of the Gallery of Distinction Awards, Loren Lieberman was at the awards, and I believe a viewer of the show asked that he mention those. So congratulations to everybody. And I'm wondering if it's the first time ever that three brothers all were brought into the gallery at the same night, the Mercantis.
That's right.
Way to go.
McMaster Marauders for setting a CIS record by winning 20 football games in a row. As a MAC alum, that's certainly something I'm very proud of. Way to go, MAC.
Yeah, so many good things happening at MAC. There's another story in the paper today about them. And the Hamilton Children's Choir for winning the Shanghai, I hope I said that right, International Choir Championships in China. I used to work with them way back in the day. I'm super proud of them. They do tremendous work. They really are a shining example of great talent in the great Hamilton organization. So way to go to all of the children and the choir director and all of the parent volunteers who make that happen. We're super proud of you, and I hope they had a great time on their trip as well.
Sing us out, Laura. Do it.
I don't sing at all.
You said you were involved in the choir. You're going to sing.
I helped them do promotions early on. I did a video for them. I don't sing. I talk. I don't sing at all, ever. Okay. And trust me, I'm sparing you.
Okay.
But let me leave you with a tweet of the week. Somebody weighed in on our discussion that we had on our update. And this is, of course, from Hamilton Property. Have a great week.